Washington, D.C. isn't just a city of politics, it is a fortress of power, wealth, and ironclad security. But in the spring of 2015, inside the exclusive enclave of Woodland Drive, just steps away from the vice president's home, that illusion of safety was incinerated. What looked like a tragic house fire was actually the final act of a 19-hour hostage siege. A billionaire family bound and tortured. A $40,000 ransom delivered in a supercar. And a killer who was cold-blooded enough to stop and eat a slice of pizza while his victims suffered upstairs. How does a perfect life turn into a living hell in the blink of an eye? And how did a single discarded crust solve one of the capital's most gruesome mysteries? Welcome to the Giang Files. It was the year 2015, and a chilling darkness descended upon Washington, D.C., the beating heart of American power. This was not a political scandal or a backroom betrayal, but a crime of such visceral brutality that it shattered the illusion of safety in the capital's most exclusive enclave. The victim was a man who seemed to have it all: immense wealth, high social standing, and a reputation for kindness. He was a billionaire who had spent his life building a legacy of philanthropy and humility, never making enemies, only friends. Yet, fate had scripted a horrific ending for him, one that would unfold. The setting of this nightmare was Woodland Drive, a prestigious address in the upper crust neighborhood of Northwest D.C., known for its diplomatic residencies and heavy security. It is a place where the air smells of old money and influence, sitting just a stone's throw from the Naval Observatory, the home of the vice president. In 2015, the neighbors included former and future presidents, and the streets were lined with Secret Service details and surveillance cameras. It was supposed to be the safest neighborhood in America. But on a quiet spring day, the high walls and sophisticated alarm systems would prove useless against a monster who had walked right through the front. Inside a mansion valued at over $4 million lived the Savopoulos family. The patriarch, Savvas Savopoulos, was the epitome of the American success story. Born in 1968 into a wealthy Maryland family, Savvas was heir to a construction empire, but he was far from the stereotype of an idle rich kid. He was a man of intellect and discipline, a martial arts expert who moved with the grace of a dancer and the strength of a fighter. He had taken the reins of his family's steel manufacturing business and expanded it, even contributing to the reconstruction of the Pentagon after the 9/11 attacks. Savvas was not just a businessman, he was a Renaissance man with a thirst for life. He held patents for complex industrial machinery, practiced photography, and loved opera. His charm was magnetic, described by friends as the kind of man parents prayed their daughters would marry. He had found his match in Amy, his high school sweetheart. Their marriage was a picture of stability and affection, a partnership that had produced 3 children. 2 daughters were away at boarding school, leaving the couple at home with their 10-year-old son, Philip, a bright young boy. May 13th, 2015, began like any other Wednesday in the regimented life of a CEO. Savvas was deeply involved in a passion project, the construction of a new martial arts studio, and spent the day overseeing the details. At home, the household was run by their loyal housekeeper, Veralicia Figueroa, a hard-working woman from El Salvador who had served the family for years. But as the afternoon sun began to dip, the atmosphere in the house shifted imperceptibly from routine to dread. The silence of the large rooms was about to be broken by a violent. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came in the form of a strange phone call. Nelisa, Another housekeeper, who had been with the family for 2 decades, received a voicemail from Savvas that evening. His voice was calm, perhaps too calm. He told her not to come into work the next day, claiming that his wife Amy was sick and that Veralicia would be staying over to help. It was a bizarre instruction. The family had never restricted her access before. Nelisa felt a prickle of unease, a sixth sense warning her that the order was a cover for something else, but she obeyed. The next morning, Thursday, May 14th, the unease spread to Veralicia's husband. His wife hadn't come home the night before, which was entirely out of character. Desperate and worried, he drove to the Savopoulos mansion. There, in the circular driveway, sat Savvas's distinct blue Porsche, parked and silent. It was mid-morning on a workday. Savvas should have been at the office hours ago. He knocked on the heavy front door, but only silence answered. Before he could panic, his phone rang. It was Savvas. The CEO repeated the story. Amy was sick at the hospital. Hours later, the facade collapsed in a storm of sirens and smoke. By early afternoon, emergency dispatchers received frantic calls reporting a fire at the mansion on Woodland Drive. Smoke billowed from the eaves, black and thick, staining the pristine blue sky of the Capitol. Firefighters rushed to the scene, expecting a standard residential blaze. They had no idea they were charging into a crime scene that would haunt even the most hardened veterans among. As the flames were beaten back, the firefighters moved into the smoldering ruins to search for survivors. What they found in the master bedroom stopped them cold. Amidst the debris and the stench of burnt wood were the charred remains of 3 adults and 1 child. They were identified as Savvas, Amy, little Philip, and the housekeeper Veralicia. But the fire hadn't killed them. The bodies told a different, more gruesome story. They had been bound, restrained. The condition of 10-year-old Philip was particularly heartbreaking. He was found in his room, burned beyond recognition, but the autopsy would later reveal he had been stabbed and beaten. The brutality inflicted on a child suggested a level of malice that went beyond simple robbery. In the master bedroom, investigators found a bloody baseball bat, a grim artifact of the torture the family had endured. It became clear that the fire was a clumsy attempt to destroy evidence, a forensic countermeasure deployed by a killer who thought fire. The investigation kicked into high gear immediately. The police quickly realized this was a targeted attack. There were no signs of forced entry. The intricate alarm system had not been triggered, and the heavy doors showed no pry marks. This detail chilled the detectives. It meant the killer had either been invited in or had a key. It pointed to an inside job or someone the family trusted implicitly. The terrifying implication was that the Savopoulos family had welcomed their executioner into their home, offering him the hospitality that would lead to their doom. While the police combed through the ashes, a critical piece of the puzzle emerged from the timeline of the previous day. Savvas's personal assistant, Jordan, told detectives he had received a frantic text from his boss on the morning of the fire. He was ordered to withdraw $40,000 in cash from the bank, specifically in $100 bills, and deliver it to the house. Jordan had followed instructions, dropping the package of money inside the garage's sports car, a red Mazda, before leaving without seeing anyone. This $40,000 ransom was the key that unlocked the motive, yet it deepened the mystery. For a man of Savvas's immense wealth, $40,000 was a negligible sum, Why would a criminal mastermind hold a family hostage for nearly 24 hours, torture them, and kill them for such a relatively small amount? It didn't make sense. If this was a professional kidnapping, the demand would have been in the millions. The low figure suggested the perpetrator was desperate, small time, or perhaps held a personal grudge that blinded him to the big. Meanwhile, the blue Porsche that Veralicia's husband had seen was now missing. Police issued an all-points bulletin for the vehicle. It was found later that evening, abandoned in a church parking lot in Maryland, miles away from the crime scene. Like the house, the car had been torched, a burning metal skeleton left to confuse the authorities. Inside the charred frame, however, forensics found a singular clue that survived the flames, a neon construction vest. But the killer had been careful. The breakthrough came not from the burnt car or the cash, but from a mundane choice made by the intruders. During the 19-hour siege inside the mansion, the killers had gotten hungry. They had ordered pizza. 2 pies from Domino's had been delivered to the front door on the night of May 13th. The delivery driver remembered the house being dark and the person who answered the door seeming agitated. The police scoured the kitchen and found the empty boxes. In the trash, they found the crusts, the discarded remnants of a meal eaten while a family lay back. Those pizza crusts were rushed to the lab. Forensic technology, the silent witness of the modern age, went to work. They extracted saliva from the bitten edge of the dough and ran the DNA profile against the National Criminal Database. The computer returned a hit, a name that would soon be plastered on every television screen in America: Darren Wint. He was 34 years old, a man with a jagged history of violence and a direct connection. Darren Wint was not a stranger. He had worked for Savvas' company, American Iron Works, years earlier as a welder. He was a disgruntled former employee who had been fired in 2005 for poor performance and erratic behavior. Wint was a man who believed the world owed him something. His record was littered with charges of assault and carrying concealed weapons. He was known to carry a machete and had a reputation for a hair-trigger temper. The gap between his firing and the murder was 10 years, a decade of stewing resentment and failure that had seemingly culminated in this explosion of violence. The police now had a name, but they didn't have the man. The manhunt for Darren Wint became a national spectacle. Federal marshals and local police coordinated a dragnet that spanned from D.C. to New York. Wint, oblivious to the fact that his DNA had identified him, was busy spending his blood money. He was tracked to New York City. Detectives tracked his phone and financial footprint. They discovered he was heading back to Washington, D.C., likely to hide out or collect more resources. On a highway in Maryland, a convoy of vehicles was spotted, a box truck and a sedan, moving in tandem. A tactical team swarmed the convoy, pinning the vehicles against the median. Inside the evidence was overwhelming, but the interrogation room revealed a man of stone. Wint denied everything. He played the confused innocent, claiming he had no idea why he was being arrested. He admitted to nothing, offering no confession and showing no remorse. But the forensic map was complete. His DNA was on the pizza crust inside the house. His DNA was on the construction vest found in the burning Porsche. His hair was found in the bedroom where Philip was murdered. The science didn't lie. The trial, however, would take years to begin. It wasn't until 2018 that Darren Wint stood before a jury. The prosecution painted a picture of a greedy, sadistic narcissist who felt entitled to the wealth he saw Savvas enjoying. They argued that Wint had used his knowledge of the family's schedule and the house's layout, gained from his time as an employee, to slip inside. He had held them hostage overnight to secure the cash delivery, tortured them to ensure compliance, and then executed them to eliminate. The defense team launched a desperate and confusing strategy. They admitted Wint was in the house, but claimed he was there against his will. They spun a tale that Wint had been framed by his own brothers, Daryl and Stefan. The defense attorney argued that Wint was a simpleton, a patsy who had been lured to the house to do a painting job, only to find himself in the middle of a nightmare orchestrated by his siblings. They claimed he ate the pizza because he was hungry. The jury didn't buy it. The prosecution dismantled the evil brother theory by showing that Wint's brothers had solid alibis and no physical evidence linking them to the scene. The DNA belonged only to Darren. The hair belonged only to Darren. The money was found with Darren. The brutality required a specific kind of rage, one that matched Wint's psychological profile perfectly. The trial On verdict day, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. The jury returned with a sweeping condemnation, guilty on all 20 counts: murder in the first degree, kidnapping, arson, burglary. As the foreman read the charges, Wint stood impassive, a blank slate of a man who had erased a family from the earth. The judge sentenced him to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. He would die in prison, a concrete box his final home, a far cry from the mansion he...
Yet, as the gavel fell, a lingering shadow remained over the case. Investigators and the public alike struggled with one nagging question. Could one man really control 4 adults and a child for 19 hours alone? Savvas was a martial artist. He was strong. How could Wint, alone, keep them all subdued without help? The police chief admitted they suspected others were involved, but without DNA or fingerprints of accomplices, no one else could be charged. The ghost of a second intruder
The aftermath of the tragedy rippled out, touching those who survived. The 2 Savopoulos daughters, Abigail and Katerina, were spared only because they were away at boarding school. They returned to a world where their entire nuclear family was gone, their home a blackened ruin. The trauma was compounded a year later when Katerina had to file a restraining order against her own grandfather, Savvas' father, alleging he was trying to control their inheritance and lives. The family empire, once a source of pride, had become a battleground of grief and greed.
The mansion on Woodland Drive, the silent witness to the atrocity, was eventually sold. It was bought at a fraction of its value, stigmatized by the horror that had unfolded within its walls. The new owners did the only thing that felt right. They bulldozed it. The grand structure was leveled to the ground, wiping the physical scar from the neighborhood. But the memory remained. A new, modern house now stands on the lot, sterile and white, trying to forget the history of the soil. In the end, the story of the Savopoulos murders is a grim parable of the fragility of the American dream. It is a story of contrasts. The disciplined creator versus the chaotic destroyer. The warmth of a loving family versus the cold entitlement of a killer. The illusion of security provided by wealth versus the raw reality of violence. Savopoulos spent a lifetime building a fortress of success, but it took The case serves as a terrifying reminder that evil does not always lurk in dark alleys or bad neighborhoods. Sometimes it knocks on the front door of the most beautiful house on the street, wearing the face of someone you once knew. The pizza crust left on the counter was a symbol of the banality of evil, a casual meal eaten in the midst of a massacre. Darren Wint eats prison food now, but the empty chairs at the Savopoulos table As we look back at the smoke rising over Washington that day, we are left with the chilling realization of how quickly a paradise can turn into an inferno. The money was recovered, the killer was caught, and the house was rebuilt. But the atmosphere of that day, the terror of those 19 hours, hangs suspended in time, a permanent scar on the history of the Capitol. It is a story that ends not with a resolution, but with a silence, the silence of a family that should still be here. What are your thoughts on the conclusion of this case? Leave your theories in the comments below. I love to hear your opinions. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel. See you in the next case file.